more detailed information about guardianship itself, adult guardianship, we do have guardianship attorneys that work for our agency, and that could be an entire session because there's a lot to know that comes with that. And we've had some recent changes in the guardianship laws that might be of interest to folks as well, and our attorneys could provide an update on that. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let's see, there it is. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, let me see it.
We see your, just as an FYI, we see your second slide as well. If you,
okay.
See the notes. Just, there you go.
There you go. Okay, yes. Guardianship and Advocacy is the name of our agency. And just to give you an overview, we are a state agency. We're a little bit different than other state agencies in that we have a board of commissioners at the top of the agency who are appointed by the governor. And our commissioners come to us with human services experience, disability-related experience, legal backgrounds. But we also have legislators from both sides of the aisle who are appointed by the governor to serve on the commission. All of our services focus on people with disabilities. Our overarching mission is to safeguard the rights of people with disabilities, and we do that through some very distinct programs, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. We have 2 administrative offices, one in Chicago, one in Springfield, and then we have 7 regional offices throughout the state, but every county should have access to one of our regional offices. We are a fairly small state agency in that we only have about 106 staff statewide. We have 4 primary programs: the Office of State Guardian, Legal Advocacy Services, Human Rights Authority, and we recently started a Special Education Advocacy Initiative. So let me go into a little bit more detail about each of these programs. Our Office of State Guardian serves as guardian of last resort for adults with disabilities, as appointed by the court. The court appoints us, and they appoint us as last resort if there's no one willing, available, or appropriate to serve as someone's guardian. We are guardian for more than 5,000 individuals across the state of Illinois. And there are some frequent ways in which we get appointed as guardians. Sometimes we get appointed through a hospital when an individual shows up in the hospital emergency room, for example. They are incapacitated, they need treatment, they can't give consent for treatment, and the hospital can't locate a surrogate to step in and assist. So sometimes the hospital will petition to have us appointed guardian. Sometimes we get appointed through Adult Protective Services when someone is found to be in an abusive or neglectful situation, and it's felt that the individual lacks capacity. And so Adult Protective Services might work with an attorney to petition to have us appointed as kind of a third party, neutral party in that situation. Sometimes we get appointed through DCFS when a child under their care reaches adulthood and is transitioning into adulthood, yet it's believed that they need a guardian as they transition. And so sometimes DCFS will petition to have us appointed. And then occasionally we get appointed successor guardian. And this happens when an individual's guardian passes away or becomes incapacitated themselves. We also have on our website a guardian training module, and this is for newly appointed guardians. A couple of years ago, we initiated legislation to require that newly appointed guardians outside of Cook County take training within a year of appointment. All prior guardians were grandfathered in, but newly appointed guardians are required to take this training unless waived by the court. And not only do you have to take the training, you have to provide proof. There's a certificate at the end of the training that individual guardians would have to submit to the court in which the guardianship was established. Anyone can take this training, though. If you're a family member considering guardianship for someone, if you're a veteran guardian, you've been doing it for a while and you just want to get an update on your role, anyone can go to the module and take the training. It's pretty good, and it talks about the guardian duties, responsibilities, limitations, and the rights that the people with disability maintain, even though they have a guardianship over them. We also have a toll-free intake line to answer questions about adult guardianship, and our website also has informational materials about guardianship. So we can be a resource to you if you know of someone who might be in need of a guardian. We can't petition to have ourselves appointed, but if the court deems we are the most appropriate guardian, then someone can petition to have us appointed guardian. I've included our toll-free number here for questions about adult guardianship, as well as our website. And again, if you would like more information about the guardianship role, you can certainly visit our website and take the guardian training. Our legal advocacy service is primarily comprised of attorneys. We have a couple of paralegals, and most often they are representing individuals with mental health needs who are facing some type of involuntary mental health proceedings. This could be involuntary commitment against their will to a mental health facility, or it could be court-ordered treatment, and that's usually psychotropic medication treatment. Our attorneys represent the individual with disabilities to ensure that they get their day in court, that they enjoy their due process protections during those proceedings. Our attorneys are also available to answer questions about mental health rights. They also provide advocacy for both children and adults in mental health settings, and they assist with something called mental health treatment declarations. These are like powers of attorney for people with mental health needs. It helps them to identify future treatment should they become incapacitated by their mental illness. And our attorneys help folks fill those out. Our legal advocacy service also has done quite a bit of appellate work, and through that appellate work, they've created quite a body of case law around mental health rights and protections. Every year, our program serves more than 7,000 individuals in our legal advocacy services. And of course, it is a resource to anyone out there if they have questions about mental health rights or the mental health process or the involuntary commitment proceedings. Our attorneys, our program is available to answer those questions. If you know of someone who's in a mental health facility and they're needing some answers about rights or their legal representation, we're a resource for that. And also, as I mentioned, if someone needs help with filling out, completing a mental health treatment declaration, we're available for that as well. Our Human Rights Authority investigates rights violations committed against people with disabilities by disability service providers. And we go into all kinds of settings. These are just a few examples, but we go into state-operated facilities, group homes, vocational programs, hospitals, special ed programs, nursing homes, and even jails, because unfortunately, sometimes people with disabilities end up in the criminal justice system. And we look at a huge array of rights violations. I just included some of the more common ones we hear about here. We get complaints about forced medication, and we've done investigations of that. We've looked at rights associated with admission, discharge, or transfers. We've looked at rights restrictions. We've looked at the use of restraint and seclusion. We've investigated confidentiality breaches as well as communication restrictions. And that's just a few examples of the many issues that we've looked at. And what we hope to do through our program is to work with the providers that we're investigating to improve rights protections through systemic changes to their policies, procedures, practices, or maybe even staff training, with the hope that whatever happened won't happen again because we're making these systemic changes. Every year we handle about 300 cases that have impact on thousands of individuals with disabilities. What is unique about our program is we conduct our work through 9 regional panels of appointed Human Rights Authority members. These are individuals who serve on a voluntary basis and contribute their time and experience and expertise. These panels operate like a board of directors, and then they are assigned a staff person who helps them go through the process, facilitate the investigations, and help with the findings, and do some of the behind the scenes legwork and legal research. Of course, the authority can be a resource to you if you have questions about disability rights associated with some type of disability service. Also, if you encounter a disability rights issue and you think it's worthy of filing a complaint, you can certainly do so. And I want to tell you a little bit about how that process works. Anyone can file a complaint. It doesn't have to be the person with a disability. It can be a family member. It can be a concerned citizen. And we do protect the identity of the complainant throughout the process. And we also protect the identity of the individual with the disability. Our regional boards make the final decision on whether or not to pursue the investigation based on our requirements under our mandates. And I always have to put in a commercial plug for our Human Rights Authority, because we're always looking for people to serve on our regional panels. And if this is something you'd be interested in doing, we'd certainly like to hear from you. We do have an application and appointment process. It's available on our website. Our regional boards are made up of service consumers, family members, guardians, concerned citizens. A lot of times retirees come and work under the Human Rights Authority. And then of course we have service provider representatives, but the majority of the regional panel is comprised, it's very citizen focused. It's comprised mostly of consumers and family members and guardians, but then we do have at least 3 service providers on each regional panel. And it's really a way for you to share your experiences and your expertise in a way that helps improve disability rights protections in the area, the region of the state where you live. As I said, it's a volunteer role. We do provide training, and we do provide travel reimbursement. Our special education initiative is really a collaboration between our 2 advocacy programs, the Legal Advocacy Service and the Human Rights Authority. And right now it's staffed by an advocate, a paralegal, and an attorney. It's intended to be a resource for Illinois families who have special ed questions or issues with the intent of providing individualized assistance. We do have on our website, we're starting to populate it with information about special education rights. And this program has actually internally trained our staff, our agency staff, as well as our Human Rights Authority members regarding special ed rights. Eventually, we hope to have a system of lay advocates across the state who can provide assistance to families. And one other thing that the team does that I think is really valuable is they review legislative proposals and provide feedback and review them from a rights perspective. We also, under our mandates, our enabling legislation called the Guardianship and Advocacy Act, we can recommend legislation. And this often happens when we encounter some issue through one of our programs that points to a rights gap or a service gap. And when we do that, we enlist one of our commissioners who's a legislator, and they're sometimes willing to sponsor that legislation. And here are just some examples of legislation that we have worked on. The guardian training requirement that I mentioned. We also initiated legislation to require that adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities and served in certain types of settings receive receive access to sex education. We were behind legislation to allow residents who live in certain types of group homes called CILAs, Community Integrated Living Arrangements, to have be able to place a camera in their room if there is a safety concern. And this is a parity bill to what's already in place for nursing home residents. And then we also developed a task force legislation to create a task force to examine how persons with disabilities interface with the criminal justice system. That task force is winding up right now and will be issuing its recommendations in the coming weeks, actually. And recently, the governor just signed, it was on August 27th, legislation that we initiated called supported decision making. And this is an alternative to guardianship for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities if they maintain some level of capacity in making decisions. So we're very excited about that, and more information will be coming available. So I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions, concerns, comments, anything that I can help you out with. And
well, just to start off, Teresa, you guys do a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things.
A lot of varied things.
I mean, wow. Yeah. And one of the things that piqued my personal interest was about the advocating the investigation for the rights that
Yes.
you guys do. What's the process for that? So do you go into long-term care facilities to investigate the use of restraints? You mentioned about medication. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, specific to long-term care facilities, we get a complaint, and it, like I said, it can come from anywhere. It can come in a phone call, a letter. We also have an online complaint form, and we review the complaint to identify whether or not it falls under our jurisdiction. And our jurisdiction is very broad. If a complaint concerns a person with a disability service, and a disability right, we're pretty much mandated to investigate it. And so, but our regional board will take a look at the complaint. They will vote to accept it. We hold public meetings. In fact, they're available to anyone. Anyone can attend. And right now they're offered virtually as well. And then if our board decides to pursue the investigation, we proceed. And we're pretty much able to use whatever means we can to investigate. We can talk to anyone in the facility that we want to talk to. We usually meet up with the provider and ask them questions related to the complaint. We usually ask for records if we have a release of information, but if we don't have a release, we can ask for masked records that protect the identity of the individual, but give us some information about the complaint issue. And then we typically ask for policies and procedures pertaining to whatever issue. If it were restraint issues, we would ask to see all the policies and procedures related to restraint, and maybe even treatment planning, something along those lines. And then we take all that information, we evaluate it, we compare it against the appropriate regulations, whether it be nursing home regulations, federal regulations. We look at the whole gamut of applicable standards. And then if we do find that there's a gap between what happened and what the law requires, then we issue findings. And the provider has 30 days to respond to our findings. Usually the recommendations that we make are systemic in nature. As I mentioned, we're looking to change policies, procedures, practices, or maybe pursue staff training. So hopefully we're looking at a long-term resolution for whatever the complaint was. And then we negotiate back and forth with the provider until we reach a negotiated conclusion. We also post our reports, our findings on our webpage. You can go back and look at, there's several years of reports posted. So it's a resource for families as well if they want to check our website about any particular facility.
Would you be able to type you don't have to do it right now, but before we leave today, people ask for your website. If you could type that into the chat,
I
that
will
would
do
be
that.
fantastic.
I will do that for sure.
And someone also said that there was a typo in the phone number of the
Oh,
LAS. Yeah. I mean, just to go back to that again, so it sounds like because there's a regulatory branch of Illinois, the Department of Public Health that oversees the long-term care side. So it sounds like you guys take it a little bit deeper and really looking for the change, not just to remedy that issue, but to look for the systemic change.
right. We sometimes look at things too outside of public health. Like, for example, I can tell you of a case we had regarding not following the Healthcare Surrogate Act, where a resident in a nursing home was maybe not, the nursing home, the doctor did not follow the Healthcare Surrogate Act when it came to end-of-life decision-making. Public health is very geared toward its regulations, its standards, but I don't think they typically enforce laws that apply to a facility or a resident, but aren't under their specific jurisdiction. So sometimes we cover some of those gaps, but we also look at things like I think of the Healthcare Surrogate Act. I also think about the Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Code. Sometimes that has some application in some facilities. And again, public health doesn't typically enforce those kinds of requirements. Americans with Disabilities Act, but we also look at the nursing home standards too and apply them. And we will do, if we get a complaint that is definitely abuse or neglect, we automatically, as mandated reporters, report it to the Department of Public Health. We might look at issues peripheral to it, like were staff adequately trained to protect against abuse or neglect? Do they have a policy in place that could improve protections in some way? So, and maybe even staff training, are they offering their staff adequate training to protect against the abuse or neglect from happening?
So how do you get the complaint to begin with? What does that process look like? Is there a hotline like there is for IDPH, and that, is it along those lines? Or
we have a toll-free intake line, and the next couple of slides I wanted to show you, and hopefully these phone numbers are correct. We have a toll-free intake line. We have our website, which does have an online complaint tool that you can complete. And then I also included all the regional numbers and the staff names who cover those regions. So you can call a regional office directly to report a concern, or you can go through our toll-free intake line.
That's great. Some the slides have been requested, so you'll share those slides with me after, so I can post them on our website.
Certainly will.
Perfect. Also, we had a question regarding, do you investigate long-term care, behavioral health facilities, SILAs, and things like that, et cetera?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, that's under our jurisdiction. We go into just about any setting that provides services to people with disabilities. And like I mentioned earlier, even jails, unfortunately, because jails do have some responsibilities in their jail standards toward people with disabilities. We are looking at, in the coming month, we're having some specialized training, and we are going to start looking at investigations of law enforcement and their interactions with people with disabilities. This is a new area. We've decided that it falls under our jurisdiction, under our mandates, given some of the roles that police officers play in getting particularly people with mental illness into hospitals. Some of the work that goes on behind the scenes, it's sometimes law enforcement who end up providing that crisis service to get someone into a hospital due to a mental health issue. So we have decided to undertake that, and we'll see how it goes. We're not sure the level of cooperation, but we're rolling that out in the coming month.
During the pandemic, did you see any increase in any of these, any of the investigations that you were conducting, and what did that look like?
We did, and I would have to say we saw an increase in complaints about communication and visitation access. And certainly we know that, visitation was limited in person, but we also heard that perhaps some facilities could have done a better job in keeping families informed. They weren't maybe notifying guardians of issues involving residents. They didn't provide a mechanism for communication, whether it be a phone or some kind of device. We saw an increase in complaints surrounding visitation and communication.
As we did in the Ombudsman office as well, we saw a lot of with the visitation issues as well. And so that's interesting that we're both seeing, we both saw the same things, but then it sounds like your approach is a little different than how the Ombudsman would approach it. And I'm still a little confused on what that looks like. Do you understand the difference more so than I would? Explain that.
I will tell you, I was in my other life, I was an ombudsman out of Peoria for a few years, many years ago. And, it is a little bit different in that we have a formal process, as I recall. Now, things may have changed. It's been a long time, but the ombudsman program at that time, it was very individualized assistance, and I did whatever I needed to do to help that individual. I met with the individual and provided individual advocacy. Under our program, it's a little bit different structure in that we do an investigation that looks at policies, procedures, in addition to meeting with the individual, in addition to meeting with staff. We're looking at some of the underlying systems, and maybe the ombudsman program does that now too. And then we do craft a formal document, that report of findings with and issue recommendations that they are required to respond to. And all of that becomes public. That becomes part of the public record, and it's posted on our website. So you can see what changes that provider, that nursing home, that facility should have made as a result of the investigation. So it's just a little bit different process. Advocacy, just the same, but we're looking at some of those systems and looking at changing some of those protections. And hopefully in the end, it will help the person involved in the initial complaint, but also help other folks in the facility as well. Does that make sense?
It sounds like there's some opportunity for some, can you hear me?
Yes.
It sounds like there's some opportunity even for some partnership to happen when, if we chronically get the same complaint happening from the same facility, and IDPH has run its realm, and because the way you document it is going to be different, and which may have a little bit of an impact that's necessarily not going to happen through the Ombudsman program, because you're publicly publishing that information onto your website as well.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, that's an excellent point, because I know ombudsmen have called us and asked us to investigate things. Likewise, we have turned to the ombudsman program when we've encountered an individual who really just needs to talk to someone and work some things out that are very specialized and individualized to the person. So I do know that we've had back and forth, and sometimes I remember one situation where an ombudsman actually sat in on one of our investigations with the permission of the facility, just to weigh in and provide some feedback, which I thought was really helpful, because that particular ombudsman was regularly in that facility, and she had seen some of the same issues and concerns that we had been asked to investigate. So it was helpful. And I know I've talked to ombudsmen too about issues that we're encountering in a given facility, just to find out if they've experienced something similar.
Oh, that's good. Because it does seem like the more that we can have helping to make that systemic change happen, because that's really, we might get the individual person talking about it, but then you can look at it more systemically, even though, there's kind of that crossover which is interesting. You mentioned the Human Rights Authority and that you were looking for, people if they want to volunteer onto that. Can you talk a little bit more about what those responsibilities look like, what that, what they actually wound up doing and how frequently it's done, all those kind of dynamics to
Sure.
it.
Our Human Rights Authority boards are supposed to meet at least once every other month. And they are to attend the meetings. The meetings are public because we are a public body. They're open to the public. So anyone can attend the meetings. We have to make it available to the public. We have to follow the Open Meetings Act requirements and so forth. So members would attend, some regions have meetings every month, some every other month, and then they would be asked to participate in a certain number of investigations. And then they would actually go with our staff person to the given site and participate in that investigation, and then provide feedback on what the outcome of that investigation should be. And again, our staff person provides the technical support, provides information about the underlying laws and regulations, and helps provide guiding information for the board member. But it's on average, we say that individuals donate about 4 hours a month. Some months it might be a meeting, another month it might be an investigation, and not everybody goes to every investigation. It's kind of whoever feels comfortable, has the expertise in a given service provider, they can kind of choose what fits with their level of experience and expertise. But sometimes it's good sometimes the members like to go to a site that maybe they are not as familiar with, just to learn more about a given disability service provider. And we hope that the Human Rights Authority members actually gain some experience in rights protections as well, and they take something away with them. We do, as I mentioned, we do provide some training. We do reimburse for mileage, and the term of office, they're 3-year terms, and they can be appointed twice. So a total of 6 years is a long time, but I'll tell you that we have many HRA members who've done the 6 years, and then they have to be off for a year, and then they can come back if there's a vacancy. And we've had many come back multiple times. So we've really appreciated the dedication of these individuals to contribute so much, and they're really a committed group of folks.
There was a question wondering if there's a particular age demographic for the services that you provide.
For our guardianship program, it's only adults. We are only guardian for adults. For our legal advocacy service and our Human Rights Authority, there's no age, children and adults. And for our Human Rights Authority, there's no limitations. It could be any kind of disability, any age, any kind of service provider. There's no limitations in terms of the type of, we've looked at issues involving persons with mental illness, older persons with developmental disabilities. We've looked at issues involving people with physical disabilities. So, it's very broad in our Human Rights Authority. The special ed program, of course, is going to be geared toward students receiving special ed, and that right now is up through the age of 22. So that would be the age range for that.
Wow, I bet that sounds like that's going to be a very good, a needed entity for all of this. That's really good. Could you talk to us a little bit about that guardianship training? I know I've taken a look at it when I've heard you speak before, to see what does the training entail? What does it look like? What are the topics? Because it does seem like a lot of people that are here today may really be interested in taking a look at it, even for their own personal knowledge, for their own advocacy that they do, or they might already be guardians for some people that live in long-term care facilities. So if you could talk to a little bit about that.
Sure. I would really encourage folks, particularly if they're a guardian or they're interested or going to be a guardian, it's really a very helpful, easy to complete training. There are two different types of training, one that issues a certificate that you can file with the court. The other one doesn't issue a certificate at all. But it starts out just explaining like what papers do you get when you become a guardian, and what papers are important to keep on hand and maybe share with a nursing home or a facility. And then it goes into the different types of guardian, and it talks about the guardian's duties, what they're required to do, what they can't do, what are guardian limits, and what are some of the rights that individuals maintain even though they have a guardian over them. I think one of the most important parts of the training has to do with guardian decision making. We go over the principles that guardians are to use when they approach decision making. And just to very briefly explain that to you, guardians are to make decisions based on substituted judgment first. That means what the person's preferences are or might have been, unless those preferences cause them harm. And guardians are to conform to those preferences. We just passed legislation this past, I think it was August 6th, that really clarified that guardians are to conform to the preferences of the individual unless those preferences would cause the individual harm. If a guardian cannot determine or ascertain an individual's preferences, then they can make decisions based on best interests. And that's best interests of the individual, taking into account decisions that would positively impact their self-determination, their independence, that would meet their needs, and also represent the least restrictive approach in serving that individual. So I think that's really one of the key parts of the training. The training also has a great resource list that you can use for, whatever, purposes, but it's a very thorough resource list for specific to persons with disabilities, but covers all different topic areas. And it gives some examples. There's even little quizzes. I mean, you're not held accountable if you get the answer wrong, but it gives you a chance to kind of to test your knowledge and your understanding of some of the situations involving guardian decision making. And I think it also gives some very good examples of choices that a guardian could make according to the law. And it goes over some of the Probate Act requirements as well.
Because I know sometimes we get involved through the Ombudsman's office with some of the guardianship versus the resident issues and what's happening, and people, there'll be a little bit of, well, when does a guardian come into play? When do they, are they listening to the person? Those sorts of things. So is that something that you do? How do you deal with something like that if it feels like the individual is saying, this is what I want, but the guardian is saying, this is what I want? How does that get dealt with?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we really encountered that a lot recently in the past couple of years over our legislation on sex education, because, guardians had concerns about that. And to what extent does a guardian have control over that situation or an individual's access to sex education? And so one of the things we created, and it's really under the sex education tab of our website, is a guardian fact sheet that talks about the role of the guardian. It's just a one-page thing, front and back, and it talks about recourse. If it's felt that a guardian is not following the Probate Act requirements regarding decision making, not considering the individual's preferences, what the recourse is. And typically we encourage individuals to try to work with the guardian, maybe ask for a treatment planning meeting to discuss a particular area that there might be conflict, see if you can't work out the conflict through the treatment planning process. If that doesn't work, maybe involve an advocacy agency, an ombudsman, to help facilitate and assist with that particular issue. If that doesn't work and the situation continues to deteriorate and it affects the person's services that they're getting, the individual could actually take the matter to court, back to the probate court where the guardianship was established, and present the issue to the judge for review. So our Guardian fact sheet outlines that. And again, I think it's under the sex ed tab because that's where we encountered the most questions and issues, but it does talk about recourse in terms of problems with or conflicts involving guardians.
So someone asked, why does someone call IGAC rather than the Ombudsman program with concerns? Do you have insights on that?
You know, I think, you know, when it comes to nursing homes, I see that there could be, you know, there's a little bit of crossover perhaps depending on the situation. I think if someone is concerned about a look back, maybe they are, they've been in a nursing home, they've left, they didn't complain then because they were afraid of retaliation, they left and they want someone to take a look at what happened to them there. That's a good example that could come to us. You know, we don't have time frames. I mean, there's sometimes when a complaint is so old or the issue is so old, it really would be impractical for us to investigate, but we can do that kind of investigation. Or if you feel that if someone wants something looked at and they want to stay anonymous, and they feel like it affects a lot of people in the facility, we can look at that. We can look at it. We can take a complaint based on a policy or a practice or a procedure in a facility, even if we don't have an identified individual whose records we are looking at. We can do policy reviews, but we do look at individual situations when it pertains to something that might fall outside of the nursing home requirements. We look at nursing home requirements too, and sometimes people just call us because they're familiar with us, but a lot of times it's for those you know, things that fall between the cracks. You know, is the home accessible, or did they apply the mental health code in this given situation where a person with mental illness was in the nursing home and it doesn't really fall exactly under the nursing home standards. We can look at some of those and like the health into life decision making. Again, that's not something that's in the public health regulations, but it's something we can apply. We can apply the Healthcare Surrogate Act and take a look at that. Our overarching, we can apply state, federal laws and just pull in anything we can to take a look at a situation just beyond the Nursing Home Care Act and the regs. Those are just a few examples.
So one of the things so one of the things with the ombudsman is we can't proceed if the person doesn't want us to. So they could tell us about a problem and then they say, but I don't want you to do anything about it. So we can only proceed if they give us the okay to do that. Are you tasked with the same, or are you allowed to, if you hear of something, you got a complaint, can you move forward no matter what, but not necessarily bring the person's name into it? Exactly. So that might be another key difference.
Yeah, we definitely can do that. We can
so
look
even
at, yeah, that's
so even as an ombudsman, if we see those things happening, we could call you and say, we don't have permission to move forward, but this is something you might want to, you know, investigate this. This is going on, but the person, I'm not going to divulge any, you know, information on it. I do not have the permission to divulge information. I don't know if we can work that way or not.
Yeah, that's a good example.
That's a key difference.
So if someone
that's
calls
a key
us,
difference though, is
yeah, it is. That's a good example because we do get complaints from people periodically, and again, anonymous complaints. This is going on in this facility, but I don't want to be involved. You know, we can go ahead and take that to the board, and they can decide to investigate. And as I said, we have the ability to look at mass records. So even though we don't have a release, we can still make a request for records, resident records. They have to mask them to give them to us, but we can look at the issue regardless of having an identified complainant. We also have the ability under our mandates to initiate an investigation. If we read about something in the paper, or we just hear about something maybe through the Office of State Guardian, our sister program, we can initiate an investigation without a complainant.
So I was just listening to a podcast today that was really talking about a big thing that goes on in long-term care, and that is people with dementia and with psychotropic drugs, giving them psychotropic drugs to help control behavior. And so is that something that you've ever looked at in any of the long-term care facilities to try to see how systemically, because this is a big issue, and I know Illinois is one of the worst performing states when it comes to reducing the psychotropic drug use in long-term care, particularly around those who have dementia. I'm curious if that's something that you guys have done any investigation.
I don't recall that being an issue that comes to us frequently, but I am aware we have looked at medication issues in the past in nursing homes and whether or not they've done reductions or are they providing any kind of treatment planning to help the person move away or get that medication reduction. We've looked at behavioral approaches, and we've looked at policies surrounding behavioral issues, dementia, those kinds of things. But yeah, that is something that we've looked at on occasion. I can't say that it's been a frequent complaint, but trends change, and if we, if we start seeing a trend in a given situation, that's when we start looking at, is there a need for legislation? And most often our legislative proposals come from, our programs, and like with the Human Rights Authority, the sex education bill arose out of, we saw repeated cases of individuals in certain kinds of setting being reprimanded if they held someone's hand or hugged someone, or they had very stringent policies, and so we really felt that, and we saw it multiple times, and we saw that reoccurring pattern. And so those are the kinds of things that get us to stop and think, do we need to look at a larger macro systemic policy change to address the issue? We have not done one regarding nursing homes of late that I can recall. We did, no, I take that back. We were involved in legislation to require that nursing homes, it may have been SILAs, provide guardians with quarterly statements of their resident accounts, because guardians weren't getting them. But I think it had to do more with group homes now that I say that. But periodically we see those patterns that you're talking about, and we just look at, and then we turn to our commissioners who are legislators, and we ask them if they'll sponsor. So it works out pretty well. But we do use the stories that we hear to look at any kind of legislative pursuit that will help folks.
Yeah, I would encourage for more of that to happen around the psychotropic drugs and dementia, because there's a lot of that happening, and it's very, very unfortunate that that when somebody has that adverse reaction, that they may act out or display that behavior, and then people give them a psychotropic drug, and then they slap a diagnosis on them to support that drug instead of the right way. People don't have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and all of a sudden they're giving it to them so that they can give them Haldol to slow them down and snow them, the word that's used in the industry, so that they don't live life like they could have previously. And that's really unfortunate. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, if you do see a facility that you think they've got the systemic policy or practice of doing that, let us know, and we'll take a look at it.
Great. That's very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you. Someone also did say they went through the legal guardian through the court system, and they took the training. So was that through IGAC that they took the training would have happened through yours, or is there another training out there that's through the court system?
Under the law, we had to offer the training, so we did it and made it available. But the court can also approve training by some other entity. I'm not aware of any other entity that's offering it, but maybe there is. But we are specifically referenced in the law as being a resource for guardian training. And we do, like I said, we provide a certificate. You can file it with the court and prove that, and you have to take it within a year of appointment, except outside of Cook County. Right now, Cook County does not have to follow that requirement.
And we're getting a lot of requests for the slides, so I'm making sure that they know that they'll be posted on the Illinois Department on Aging website under the Ombudsman page and the Resident and Family Support Council page. So that everyone's aware, because you had a lot of really great information inside of those. So is there anything else that you feel is important for us to know about your program?
You know, we are such a little known. One of the frustrating things about this agency is we're so small, and people don't know about us. So I just appreciate this opportunity to share information, and feel free to pass it along. You know, we as many avenues as we can get to get the word out that we're a resource for families in all kinds of disability related settings. We just appreciate that sharing of information. So that's probably the most significant thing I would ask. And again, if anyone wants to serve on a regional human rights authority, we'd love to hear from you.
And we'd also ask that you share our Resident and Family Support Council with people, because it does sound like whether it is some topic, you might have some insights as a participant, and or might hear some of what some of the concerns are that people are bringing forward, some of the family members or residents that they're bringing concerns forward about. So again, it might be a nice referred to each other, so that we can keep the positive change happening.
Absolutely.
In long-term care.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, because this is where people live. This is home. And we have to, well, what I'm going to do is I will be staying on, because I know sometimes we get a lot of questions that kind of pop through towards the end of the meeting. And if I get those questions, Teresa, I will forward those on to you, and we will make sure that we get those answered. Our next topic for our next meeting is going to be on what person-centered care is all about. And so we'll be talking about that. And we're actually have invited an administrator who's doing in the long-term care community, who is engaging in a lot of person-centered care practices, to talk about how that looks and what that feels like for the people who work there and live there. And then the topic after that is going to be about care plans and utilizing those care plans to get your person-centered care needs met. So we're kind of bridging it all together, because next month is Residents' Rights Month. So we really see the care plan as being an amazing tool for making sure that you are getting your rights met the way they should be met. So do know I will be staying on for a little bit until we have people that are no longer on to be able to take down any other questions. I also want to give a shout out to Karen at the Illinois Department on Aging. She has been great. She has posted a lot of different information in there regarding the regulations. Karen, thanks a lot. You've been really great in doing that during these calls, and I so appreciate that. Just to let you know that that's greatly appreciated. So there's a lot of links. You can go into the chat box, click on that link, and that way then it will be open for you even after this webinar ends, and then you can save it as a favorite if that's what you would like to do. So go ahead, go through that chat right now, click on any links that you'd like to click on, and that way then you'll have them to be able to reference down the line. This will be getting posted on the website. Last thing I want to do is I'm going to pop a poll up. And if you could please just tell us how beneficial this was to you today. because this just helps us know what sort of topics you really are looking for. It's important for us to be able to know what people want, because that's what we want to be able to share. That's the idea of this council, is information, empowerment through information. So great. It seems like we've got a lot. 100% of the people have answered. This is wonderful. And so it seems like we've got people that really feel that this information was very beneficial to you. 60% said very, very beneficial. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will be staying on. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, hopefully. Okay. Wonderful to see everybody. Have a good week, 2 weeks.